What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and today I'm going to cover an early access title, of course, it being Endless Space number 2. Now, everybody probably understands how disappointed even I've been with my handling of early access titles. You know, covering early access titles is a little bit like betting on a race that is going to finish about 6 years from now. You never quite know exactly what you're seeing and how it's going to end up getting into people's hands and what you should suggest or not suggest. And I've always had difficulty coming to that final conclusion. Check it out, don't check it out, always seemed like a 50-50 proposal to me and pretty light. And then you really can't go with buy, wait for sale, never touch kind of thing because that doesn't really make sense on an early access title. So I figured today I'm just going to talk about Endless Space 2, my experiences with the preview that I was given and the early access to it that I was given, and just jump in here and tell you everything that I thought about it in a little bit of a slower process. The reason why I'm doing that is because even my own family can't stand to hear me talk as fast as I normally talk in some of my Reviewer Bits videos or in my review videos for longer periods of time than like 15 minutes before somebody wants to commit seppuku. So let's just jump in. So when you end up starting, you have a choice of 4 races with some locked off. You have the Vaudiana, I think is how it's pronounced, and that's a new race, and they're this sort of class that doesn't really, or faction that doesn't really have its own home planet. And one of the things I actually liked about them is the way in which they go about spreading around the world. They have this sort of arc, and so instead of colonizing the actual star systems themselves, they can move everywhere and then drain other factions to sort of give themselves more power to develop. And that was interesting. I wasn't quite very good at those guys because they are such a different style of gameplay than I'm accustomed to. It certainly was different than any of the other game tactics that the other factions used. Here you have the setup, of course, for the different empires and the different setups. I wasn't able to get a very large overall star system. I noticed that everything was set at medium no matter what options I chose. Either I wasn't doing the combination of options correctly, or I had an issue where perhaps because this is the preview, they're not releasing a ton of that. Now, one of the things I really liked is, of course, I've always felt that Endless Space, all the Endless games, have done a really good job with their lore. Endless Space 2 does an incredible job announcing their lore right up front with these videos that start up, and they cover each race in these snippets, and they're still some of the best overall bits of past, present, and future for a race that I've seen in a 4X style game. It just feels right. It makes sense to me. And each one has this sort of poignancy, and I love the fact that these are the Cravers, of course, one of my favorite races. I love the fact that there's a despair to each one of the races. There's something almost like we get in some different fictions, whether it be Warhammer 40,000, where you get that sort of feeling of an empire that it's at its end. All of the races feel that way in a different tact, and I've really enjoyed these startups. And so we'll just jump into the actual gameplay here. You know, one of the things these games are known for is their graphical presentation of their UI. Now, I like their UI. I know some people who don't. I'm going to show you some of the problems I have with the UI in this version. And of course, this being early access, let's remember that. It's very important to remember that this is all early access. Even the size of a box may change. When it comes to presentation like this, you have really 3 zooms. You have the galaxy view, a zoomed in solar system view, and then here at the planet view. And you have all of these graphical indicators for food and mechanical or production and so forth. One of the things that was a little bit difficult to understand was that when you were zooming in and out of planets, you see them move around, which is a little odd. Additionally, here in the resource tree, this was confusing as hell when I first saw it. It's nowhere near as easy to understand as the original titles, production tree and technology tree. Here, these boxes, at first when I came in here, I was like, well, what are the levels for? I don't get it. The levels are right and left. Why are there boxes separating things? And you find out as you go what the specialities are, but really, honestly, I think that is woefully inadequate as a technology tree. It's just not good game design. And I ended up having somebody come over and we were checking this out, and I was like, what do you think of this? And the first thing they said was, it looks like somebody made a pizza, but they just threw the toppings on randomly. And that is exactly what that technology tree feels like. It is not at all easy to understand. It just doesn't make any sense. It goes right to left and up and down and right and left and up and down in its own sections. It's just ultimately confusing for no reason. You know, I've talked in the past about graphical presentations being a little too busy. Here we see as I zoom in, those planets sort of circle around and line up straight and then go back. When you zoom in and out, that can happen on their own without them going into that nested menu. And that can be a little bit bothersome. It can be just a little bit busy. It's something that I noticed throughout my time with Endless Space 2 is that it did feel a little bit like they were trying to wow with their graphical presentation. And they did in many ways, but it certainly wasn't where I would have liked it. Now, I've covered this up, unfortunately. We're seeing a new location being found, and we're seeing the planet zoom in. Let me jump to a place where you can see that. So here we go. When you explore an area, you now get these planet pop-ups that tell you what's on them and the curiosities that are on them that scout ships can then investigate on each planet. So even if the planet is inhospitable, you can still investigate these curiosities and get pluses and minuses for them. It's just really, presentation-wise, super, super high level, but at the same time, a little bit busy. This situation I actually really like. This is very skippable. It did have a little bit of a graphics nudge going on, a little bit of a bump going on when this happened, and I'm assuming that's because of some loading issues. But I really liked this presentation. I really like a lot of the aspects of it. Here, very easy to understand what's going on at different planets. Missing technology unknown. It'll tell you if you actually have that technology but just haven't unlocked it. So they continue to deliver a good amount of information, but at the same time, you know what I would like? I would really like a cleanup in the horizontal and vertical for their delivery. They have a tendency to deliver information in some areas vertically with symbols, some areas horizontally, and then in the lower left you see on the planets, it's just a box of boxes. It's a box of boxes. And that can actually get a little bit confusing. It's almost like the design doesn't have a cohesive structure. It's not all one certain way. Even here, they're just listed out null, outstanding, null, and weak for what they have, but they're not within a box. And that's one of the only places you'll see those pop up not in a box. And I get the idea of having a slick presentation, but there's so many different jarring parts there that can be a little bit bothersome. Now, again, these are just small things I noticed. Certainly am not saying that they're terrible. And of course, here we're doing a expedition onto the planet, and we found Eden incense, which is of course an item that you adds to your trade values. This is just me. Once again, I really like this, that ability to sort of investigate planets that you have no actual ability to land on, but you can still basically send down, almost in a Mass Effect 2 style of way, send down some different probes. But here, you actually get somewhat of a pretty cool return, and they can add things to your economy, add things to your war ability. It really does just run the gamut of what you can end up getting. And of course, quests. So I actually really liked this. The quests are great because you don't have to do them, but each one comes up with 2 or 3 different options, and you get to decide what you want to do. This was a very difficult quest. Basically, another Craver ship, not my own because I am the Cravers, started killing my people, and I could choose to send a fleet to destroy it or send a fleet to basically block them and see what was going on. And I decided to send a fleet to destroy them. And this was actually a very fun quest because what it did is it gives you that feeling of dynamic within the gameplay title, where you're not just building up on your own and, let's say, increasing your ability to trade, right? Or increasing your ability to do military stuff, or increasing your ability to run the worlds via religion. You can do those things, but you also have these quests that give you pluses and minuses and also can hurt you. And you can follow those as well. And so what that does is it gives you that feeling of dynamics that some of these space strategy games just don't really have. And it's one little difference that I found in Endless Space 2 that, some stuff like this does happen in other games, but I felt that the presentation was really in your face here, which was nice. It sort of told you, hey, here's a quest. You can do this particular thing. The quest is, of course, pinned up on the top right. You can turn that on and off. Now, when it comes to queuing and it comes to all of the different stuff for creating vehicles, creating ships, and building up resources on planets, I did have a couple issues. One of the things I noticed right away is right-clicking on anything within any of the menus basically deletes it, or basically tells the system, hey, you don't want it anymore. So if you're in a queue, it just deletes that item, and I was not happy at all with that. And also, of course, we see that the situation where you have your ships on your planet after you've built them, and you have to actually create that fleet to get them to pop out. And I know some people like that and dislike that in these games, but I noticed it. Now, when it comes to diplomacy, not a lot has changed. You, of course, unlock more as you get more in your tech tree and you get more items you can trade. It's pretty much status quo. It's the same stuff that we've always seen when it comes to the technology trees impacting the diplomacy in these games. The ability to reverse the diplomacy position and see it from the other side is there. I didn't find it useful at all. I can see where some people it would be. It depends on how you do your end game. I also found that the enemies were both, fairly bombastic when it came to their overall aggressiveness. And then other characters and races were actually pretty laid back. And so that was actually cool to see how the AI reacted. Long-term games, we're going to have to see how that works out. But overall, I would say the diplomacy is pretty status quo. There's nothing in it that I felt was super just unbelievable and never before seen. And yet at the same time, it didn't have any glaring deficiencies, even though I wasn't neck deep in it at any one time in these games. I think showing a battle at the same time I talk about sound is probably good. I like it. There's a couple things that I noticed right away that many people are probably going to notice. If you have the same overall technology with the different races, okay? So if you have a recoilless gun, then everybody else has that at a certain level as well. And I did notice when you put two ships together, they may look totally different, but the ship gun sounds were identical. And that was actually sort of funny, like two completely different races using guns that were literally 7.62s. Like they were both using the exact same rifling. That was a little bit odd, but once you get more and more options, you usually don't run into that too much. But here in this battle, especially in those first starting battles, you notice it a lot. I would say sound is actually pretty good. Of course, there is not a lot of sound in space, but you of course have it here, and that only makes sense because you want it to be bombastic, over the top. You want to make sure people feel like, once again, they're doing those big battleship, kind of fights, almost World War II style. Babylon 5 style, especially in, the Shadow Wars and those kind of thing. And you do get it. And I think that's great. Sound effects when you're moving around the different menus is actually very good. There's a good, nice, affirmative sound effect for your choices, which I'm always actually impressed that some games actually don't do that, and it's sort of sad. That I like all of the menu effects in Endless Space. It's one of the things that when you're playing a game like this and you're in those menus tons of times, if there's a grating sound, like a really high shear sound when you click on something, it can actually get bothersome over a long period of time. And everything here was done in a really good frequency, really good tone, so it was easy to take. Now, when it comes to music, I talked about this with Endless Space 1. Music in the Endless Space games are some of my favorite music of all time. I did not feel that Endless Space 2 was equal to Endless Space 1 yet when it comes to audio. Endless Space 1, I absolutely love the soundtrack. I have the soundtrack in my car right now. I have the soundtrack at home. I listen to it multiple times. I love everything from the main menu music to the exploratory music. And in no way, shape, or form do I think Endless 2 is as good. That's just the way it is. Endless 1 really, really shocked me how much I liked it. And I'm just not at all a fan of the soundtrack anywhere near the original, and that's just too bad. So as we move forward, there is no voice here. Let's just jump into some gameplay. It's the typical gameplay you would expect in a 4X game. It is the typical gameplay you would expect in an Endless Space sequel. That's what they've done, is they've made a sequel. So there isn't a ton of surprising stuff. But let's talk a little bit about combat, because I know a lot of people were expecting the same kind of combat. We know some things have changed. So let's just go ahead and jump into combat. Now, when you first enter combat or get alerted that there's a combat, you can choose not only your battle tactics, but you can actually see where you're battling and if there's any pluses or minuses, like is there an asteroid field. Now, when you choose the battle plan, I really like this. I like the overall larger feeling, the Babylon 5 feeling of battle, where the guys go in with an overall battle plan, and that battle plan is supposed to, in some way, as you can see on the left, 100% compatibility. That means with the weapons. It's 100% compatible. That move is 100% compatible with the weapons. They won't receive a negative or a plus to their bonus when it comes to damage. I like that. I also like the fact that you can see what the enemy has chosen if you've had multiple engagements with them. For me, this actually sort of lends a fantasy fiction to everything, where you feel like maybe these commanders are living through battles and going and telling one another, hey, this is what worked the last time, or this is what didn't work, try this next time. And you go in with an overall strategy, but a lot of what plays out is how you've set up your ships prior. Now, this we've seen multiple times, but a lot of people wanted more control over their ships within battle. You do not get a bunch. That's not really what Endless Space is about. So if you're expecting a super deep battle system in the preview here in the early access, that is not here. You have a couple choices, and then you put them out there, and you hope that the way you put those ships together prior is actually what pays off in the end, and the couple choices you did. So this is more of a hands-off type of situation. Now, I personally love that. I know some people who hate it, and they feel it's super shallow. I get that. I do. I don't feel it's that way. I feel like I love the idea of interstellar battles where you don't have communication back to home base all the time, and sometimes you just have to go in and hope. Now, one thing, when it comes to the cameras, it certainly feels like they're not dynamic, which means that the game probably has a max limit of ships you'll ever be able to command, and it sets up the camera for those, which means occasionally battle is never going to give you the right overall camera view. You're going to see the nose of a ship coming in from very far away, get hit a couple times and then disappear, and that does happen. Now, I like the scan button. This allows you to see real-time information on the amount of damage the ship is taking and all that kind of stuff. And I have to say, graphically, this is just dialed to like 14. The graphics in these areas is insane and really, really eye-pleasing. It really is pleasing to the eye to watch these kind of battles. Now, I think lastly, we'll look a little bit more at how planets are handled. They're handled pretty much the same way as they were before. You have the heroes you can put as governors, or you can have them in control, of course, of different ships and different fleets. But what you can see here is that, of course, you have the different items on each planet, what it creates, and then you have the question marks blinking. And, of course, those are the puzzles that you can end up basically investigating, finding out what's going on the planet, and getting pluses, once again, regardless if they're hospitable or not, regardless if you can colonize them or not, which I actually found really cool. Now, when it comes to this screen, as I stated before, Endless Space does have a little bit of an issue with its graphics presentation and being a little bit busy. You see here, there's multiple different graphical elements on multiple different menu systems on multiple different levels. And I think that's a little too much. I would have liked to have seen them clean up this menu just a little bit, because they have numbers next to symbols, and then they have lines next to numbers next to symbols. And sometimes you're wondering, for example, why they don't just have a number and a symbol, where in one place they may have a number, a line, and a symbol all together, all explaining pretty much the same thing. That can get a little bit messy. And especially when you're viewing something like this, you know, when you go into these menus here, there's so many things. The lower left or in the middle left, you can see happy, you can see where people are, but you have another bar. You have a bar, and it's one of the only places there is a bar in the entire game. It makes no sense when a number would have worked just as well to suffice and give you that data that you needed. Of course, worldview is important. What do we see here? Once again, you have this great section when you go to a place that you've just recently discovered, and it gives you these nice big pop-ups, and again, a little bit graphically odd when the pop-ups look nothing like the rest of the game. There are some issues there. But one thing I did like is that regardless of the menu you're in, there is a good amount of data. It's a little bit hard to parse at times, but I did like the fact that, like, let's say when you're out in the galaxy map, you can actually see a great amount of data without having to zoom in. You can't see all of it, but you can see what they're working on. You can see what they have on the planet. Like here, you can see it's colonizable with just a button. You don't have to, like, go into some things, which we've seen in other games. So there's a lot of positivity there. There's a lot of different things that I really, really like about the title. But you know, you can tell it's early access. They're missing 4 factions. They have 4, so it'll be an 8 total factions with at least one new one, which is the one that I got to play here. And I like that fact. I like that they've got those new factions. It's going to be very interesting. They also really don't have a problem going out there and having the factions really have different positives and negatives. I mean, we've seen the Ravager style, the Nomad style of race. I think we've seen that multiple times before. But the way they've handled their energy use in this game and the way that it's going to go about sort of becoming powerful is a bit different than everybody else's. It will actually play substantially different, which of course will impact their balancing. They're definitely going to have to look at that. Now, remembering in these games, you create outposts, you don't create colonies. When you create an outpost, that outpost has a certain amount of growth, and then they become a colony, which is actually another cool step I like, because it's sort of like you throw some people down, you got to sort of protect them. I always like to send at least one ship there to sort of protect the location, and I like that fact that they're growing up. It's not a full-fledged colony. You know, in some games we see, even if there's places to build, it's like, boom, you've got a new planet, you're naming it yours, that kind of thing. Here, yeah, you name it, or, well, it's named, but you have a situation where you're just a little podunk outpost. It's not really offering anything. You have to wait a while. Yeah, you can do certain things, of course, to speed it up like any game of its kind, but I did enjoy that. Now, here's the size. This is the double spiral universe size, and this is, I think, at around medium. So I was really surprised at how small it was. And again, I couldn't choose large or extra large in the settings for the maps. I don't know if there was an issue with my game. But I really certainly hope you can have much larger maps on here, especially because games are going to be fairly truncated. You can, of course, choose to have anywhere from 1 enemy race to, I think, 8, even on the smaller ones. I think it was 6 or 8. So you could have pretty crazy situations on a small galaxy map. And of course, heroes are pretty much the same in this game. Not a lot has changed. They experience growth just like the other times, where if they go into battle, they get things, they get certain skills, they go up in levels, and they have a ship design that's particular to them, which you can actually see within the battles, which is very cool. We don't see a huge number of changes in the way the heroes are created or work currently, but there is some hopes from what I'm reading in their documentation that we're going to see more and more increases in some of this stuff. So I would really like to see the heroes make more of a difference in this game, especially when it comes to battle, because you know, you put a hero on a planet, they give it a couple pluses, and that's pretty much it. They're title locked in a weird way. It's just like boom, they're there, front facing, and you'll never see him again unless you see him as an icon, you know, leading that planet, or you pull him off the planet. But when it comes to battles, you put him in charge of a ship. I would like to see him get far bigger bonuses. I want to see heroes really matter. I don't know about anybody else, but I'd really like to see a hero friggin' matter, where it's like, this guy is a hero. You know, we talk about this in all of our history books, where there's some hero that really did lead the charge, or, you know, the drunk commander in the Civil War that ended up, you know, getting tons of people killed, so they sent him off to go fight Indians somewhere. That kind of thing. I would love to see that here. I would love to see the heroes really have this full plotted out feel to them. And speaking of plot, they've talked about the story in the game, and they have discussed that it will have a full-on meta plot within the title. Now, that'll be interesting to see how they're going to handle it across different races. Most likely we might see something where, once again, you have like an ultimate evil showing up. Who knows how that's going to be. Maybe it'll be a battle royal, you know, 7 alien races enter, 1 alien race leaves. Who knows. Also, when it came to the trading system, the system is, you know, it's one of those games where I never felt that the trading system was actually incredibly robust. That it's a little bit different than the diplomacy system, where to me I would actually like a little bit more information about what was being traded where, and where those economies were going, and what exactly was all sort of being encompassed in that. But right now I just haven't jumped into it enough to really give an idea of just how much is there. I certainly feel that because some of the alien races are merchants at their very, very core, especially with one of the races actually buying planets versus colonizing them, it's going to be very interesting to see how that happens. But I haven't seen enough yet to really make a judgment. But I think when it comes down to it, and you look at the sound, music, graphics, voice, which there is none, and you look at the gameplay, it's there. There is some issues there with presentation. When it comes to fun factor, it is very fun. I liked Endless Space 1. I like Endless Space 2. There are some issues with Endless Space 2 that I did not run into with 1, but this is a early access title. This is a title that is in no way, shape, or form done, and they have a ton of fixes. They have a sheet that they give you that says what they're doing, and it's crazy. There is a ton of stuff being added. I have a lot of hope for this game, fixing some of the little issues, just making things make a little bit more sense, making things a little slicker. But right now you have a system, it's absolutely uncrashable, by the way. I was doing things in the background with the computer. I was crazy multitasking while I had this on, and I was really blown away. Super stable, which is always nice. This tech tree, gotta go. Gotta go. One of the worst tech trees I've seen in a game. It just makes no sense at all. It's just not a good tech tree. So I'm hoping we see some improvements there. But as a title, I'd say fun factors through the roof. Very enjoyable game. Spent multiple hours in it. Going to continue to spend multiple hours in it. And, you know, when it comes down to it, it is Endless Space 2, guys. So if you're expecting some random change where everything is going to be fixed with Endless Space 1 that maybe you disliked, I would check into it a little bit deeper to verify that's actually true, because it probably isn't. But what you will see is some improvements on Endless Space 1, as well as some new additions. And I think, for me at least, I'm pretty happy with that. So that's it for me. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike it, give it a thumbs down. Make sure to check out Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, all that kind of stuff. Every little bit helps. With your support, we can continue to bring you reviews and previews that aren't 2 minutes long and filled with sponsored bullshit. So as always, peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.